The bank was crowded in the morning, white lights casting down on busy faces, the clatter of printers mingling with the steady click of shoes on the cold tile floor. Joanne entered, her trembling hand gripping her daughter's. Rebecca. At 68, she had never felt so out of place in a crowd. She wore an old woolen coat, a familiar scent of lavender lingering around its collar. Checking her savings account at the bank should have been a simple task, but Rebecca said, "Mom, today we need to complete an important procedure. It will make you more secure with your assets. I've already prepared the documents. All you need to do is sign." Rebecca smiled, a calculating smile that Joanne didn't recognize. She clutched the blue file folder, its contents thick with paper. To outsiders, Rebecca appeared to be a caring daughter, escorting her mother to a public place to handle matters for her. But Rebecca's heart held only one burning desire: to control all the money her mother had saved her entire life, and the house, her only valuable asset. Joanne frowned slightly. She didn't fully understand what this procedure entailed, only feeling her daughter's insistence. But Rebecca's gentle eyes and the seemingly caring squeeze of her hand made her nod again. After so many years of mother-daughter love, she didn't want to doubt her. They sat down at counter number 4. There, Brian, a young bank teller, around 30, was organizing paperwork. He had bright, sharp eyes, accustomed to observing the smallest details of customers. When he saw Rebecca quickly lay out the documents on the desk, Brian glanced over them. A thick stack of papers, the title subtly indicating transfer and full power of attorney. "Hello, how can I help you both today?" Brian asked with a polite smile. Rebecca immediately pushed the documents towards him, her voice hurried. "These are the papers my mother needs to sign to secure her account and assets. It's just a simple procedure. Please give her the pen so she can sign right away. We're in a hurry." Joanne blinked, her hand trembling. She didn't have time to read. The tiny, legally dense words were incomprehensible. Her mind felt hazy, her daughter's words echoing in her head. "Trust me, Mom. I just want to take care of things for you." Brian paused. He didn't offer the pen. Instead, he looked directly at Joanne. "Are you sure you understand the contents of these documents? This is not a simple procedure, as she claims." The question hung in the air, reverberating in the thick atmosphere. Joanne froze, her heart pounding. Rebecca immediately frowned, lowering her voice, yet it remained sharp and cold. "Are you accusing me of trying to scam my own mother? This is a private family matter." "Please hurry." Brian remained unfazed. He turned to the first page, pointing to the bold text. "Full power of attorney and ownership transfer." He spoke clearly and slowly so Joanne could hear. "If you sign this, it means you are granting her full quin to use the accounts and the house that are in your name. Are you sure you want to do this?" Those words struck Joanne like lightning. Joanne trembled, looking down at the pages, then up at her daughter. Rebecca showed a flicker of guilt, but quickly regained her composure, gripping her mother's hand tightly. "Mom, don't listen to him. This is just so I can handle everything for you, so you don't have to bother with it anymore. Mom, sign it. Please believe me." But in that moment, Joanne suddenly saw Rebecca's eyes, no longer the gaze of the little daughter she had held, but the cold eyes of someone ready to devour everything. Her hand trembled, almost dropping the pen. Her heart ached, a mix of pain and fear. Brian stated firmly, "You don't have to sign right away. I advise you to take this document home and have a lawyer or someone you trust review it before making a decision. These are your rights and your future." Silence descended. Joanne sat frozen, caught between two pressures, her daughter's angry, urging gaze on one side and the stranger's steady voice on the other. The entire bank seemed to hold its breath. And in that instant, she realized she was standing on the precipice, where a signature could erase a lifetime of hard work and the fragile trust she had in her daughter. Joanne walked out of the bank, her legs feeling like they might give way. The midday sun beat down on the pavement, but she felt a chill to the bone. Rebecca walked beside her, her face red with anger, but she said nothing. Joanne knew that if she spoke, her daughter would unleash a torrent of bitter reproaches. She remained silent, hearing only the sharp thud of Rebecca's shoes on the ground, each step a dagger piercing her heart. As the car door slammed shut, Joanne closed her eyes. The clamor of the city streets faded, replaced by a flood of memories. She saw Rebecca again, the little girl with curly hair, running happily in the backyard of their small house. Those big, round eyes that once looked at her mother with such admiration and trust. "Mom, I want to be a doctor so I can heal you when you're old," Rebecca had said, her voice young but full of determination. Joanne had smiled then, holding her daughter close, believing she was raising a child filled with love. For years, she worked and saved every penny so Rebecca could attend good schools and have a bright future. She was proud when her daughter received a university scholarship, proud when she entered the business world. But alongside that pride, a shadow of unease began to grow. Rebecca grew up and was no longer the cute, innocent little girl. Her personality became strong, ambitious, and sometimes ruthless. Joanne clearly remembered the first time the two had a fierce argument. Rebecca, around 23 at the time, had just suffered a setback in an investment deal. She turned to her mother, slamming her hand on the table. "If you had just mortgaged the house so I could borrow more capital, I wouldn't be in this mess now." Joanne was stunned. That house, where she and her husband had spent their lives building, was a sacred place of memories, of love. She refused, and that was when she saw a flash of hatred in her daughter's eyes. That flash, which seemed fleeting, later became like a hidden ember, growing brighter and brighter. For years, Joanne tried to tell herself, "She's just being impulsive, she'll understand me." But time and time again, Rebecca disappointed her. From borrowing money without repayment to lying to gain trust, Joanne had turned a blind eye many times. Outsiders might criticize her for being too lenient, but what mother's heart could bear to see her child go astray? Now, recalling those moments, Joanne realized she had sown the seeds for today's tragedy. She had trusted too much, conceded too much, and feared losing her daughter too much, allowing all boundaries to blur. Sitting in the car, with Rebecca silently beside her, her shoulders tense, Joanne felt a fear greater than the fear of being deceived. The terrifying truth that the daughter she had loved with all her heart had become a stranger before her very eyes. Joanne remembered the early years of her marriage, the time when she and Richard, her late husband, built everything from scratch together. Richard was a man of few words, but great sincerity. He worked in a lumber mill, and Joanne worked as a secretary in a small company. They weren't wealthy, but they were full of love and mutual trust. The current house, the home where Rebecca grew up, was the culmination of those frugal years. Joanne still vividly remembered the days when they saved every spare cent to buy bricks and wood, and Richard personally crafted each door. He often said, "This house will shelter us for our entire lives, and later, our daughter too." Whenever she heard this, Joanne's heart would warm, as if assured that his love for the family was steadfast and unshakable. When Richard passed away from heart disease, Joanne was devastated. Suddenly losing the pillar of their lives, she felt her world crumble around her. But there was Rebecca, then only 16, the sole reason for her to persevere. In his will, Richard left all his assets to Joanne with the instruction, "Keep the house. Don't let anyone force you to give it up. This is your and your daughter's home." Joanne never forgot that last wish. But Rebecca had a different memory of her father. The last time the father and daughter met, Richard had refused to give Rebecca money for a car. She had stormed off in a huff and hadn't spoken to him for a week. When he passed away, Rebecca sobbed uncontrollably. But Joanne knew it wasn't just the pain of losing a father, but also regret for not having had the chance to reconcile. That shadow seemed to have imprinted itself on her heart, transforming into a stubbornness, a complex of inferiority mixed with ambition, as if Rebecca had to prove to the world that she deserved what her father had once denied her. Joanne often caught her daughter looking at the house with a strange expression, a mixture of longing and resentment. One time, while Joanne was organizing papers in the study, she discovered Rebecca had opened the safe. Inside were only the property deeds and savings account books. When caught, Rebecca just laughed it off. "I just wanted to know where you kept them, in case I needed them." Joanne froze, a fleeting sense of unease crossing her mind, but she brushed it aside. It was only now that Joanne realized these seemingly small details were all signs. But on that day, maternal love had blinded her. She chose to believe in her daughter's smile and promises, rather than face the truth. And thus, the gap between mother and daughter widened, leading to the scene that had just occurred at the bank. Rebecca no longer hesitating to use their familial bond to plot to take everything. As she entered adulthood, Rebecca harbored a burning ambition to become a successful, powerful woman, vastly different from her parents' frugal life. Joanne had thought that was a good thing. She was willing to pool her resources for her daughter to study economics, believing that with her intelligence and ability, Rebecca would forge a brilliant path for herself. But life wasn't as she dreamed. Rebecca entered the business world with more recklessness than skill. In her first year after graduation, she borrowed money to open a fashion boutique. Joanne clearly remembered the day Rebecca boasted, "Mom, I'm going to turn this into a major brand, and the whole country will know my name." She had wholeheartedly supported her, even giving her daughter her small savings as capital. Just 6 months later, the boutique closed. Rebecca was drowning in debt, her attitude defiant. "Failure is the mother of success. Don't act like I've ruined anything major." Joanne remained silent, not blaming her, only advising her daughter to be more careful. But deep down, she knew she was stepping into a new cycle, one that Rebecca would repeatedly fall into. In the following years, Rebecca tried her hand at various ventures, small-scale real estate dealings, investing in tech startups, and then stock trading. Each time she lost money, she would return to her mother. And each time, Joanne's heart softened. Although she no longer had ample funds, she still managed to scrape together money, even withdrawing a portion of her retirement savings early. She thought, just help her one more time, and she'll mature. But that one more time stretched on endlessly, with no end in sight. One of the most heated arguments occurred when Rebecca was 30. Joanne refused to sell a portion of the garden, the land Richard had used to grow roses, a testament to their love. Rebecca became furious, smashed a glass of water, and yelled at her mother, "You're always so selfish. Dad's dead. Why are you still clinging to the house and the land? I need it, and you only think of yourself." Joanne was stunned. Every word from her daughter cut like a knife. She replied, trembling, "This is our home, what your father left us. I cannot sell it." It's not out of selfishness, but because it's the memories, the very blood of this family. But Rebecca sneered, her eyes blazing. "I don't need memories. I need money to live, to move forward. You live in the past, but I can't bury myself like that." From that day on, a deep chasm formed between them. The more Joanne tried to cling to their mother-daughter bond, the more constrained Rebecca felt. Occasionally, Rebecca would still act tenderly, buying her mother gifts, taking her out to eat. But Joanne gradually learned to read between the lines, between the smiles. Everything concealed an agenda. And that agenda, sooner or later, always circled back to money. Now, in retrospect, Joanne saw those arguments not as fleeting conflicts, but as alarm bells. Bells she had chosen to ignore, clinging to the slim hope that love could change a person. But that hope, in the end, was turning into a knife stabbing her back. There were moments Joanne had dismissed as trivial back then, but now, sifting through her memories, she realized they were all glaring signs. Once, a few years ago, Joanne received a call from the bank. They informed her that she had just opened a new credit card. Joanne was surprised, as she had never been fond of using cards. When she went to the branch to check, the employee said, "There is indeed an application under your name, but the signature is a bit strange." At the time, Joanne forced a smile, assuming it was just an administrative error. She didn't dwell on it, not wanting to suspect anyone, but thinking back now, Joanne saw clearly it was Rebecca's doing. Another time, Joanne found a photocopy of the house deed in the living room drawer. Rebecca explained it was just for safekeeping. "In case we need to take out a loan, you'll know what assets we have." Joanne felt a flicker of annoyance, but then told herself, "She's just being curious. Why would I think my own daughter would do something bad?" There was even a time Joanne saw her daughter spending hours in front of the computer, repeatedly opening legal documents, contracts, and power of attorney forms. When she asked, Rebecca simply replied vaguely, "I'm learning more about the law so I can protect you better in the future." Joanne had smiled, even felt reassured. Little did she know that was precisely when Rebecca was rehearsing for today, the day she would trap her own mother with a forged signature. Family meals also held many clues. Every time Joanne mentioned her savings or plans to renovate the house, Rebecca's eyes would light up, tinged with tension. One time, as Joanne was saying, "I'm planning to set aside some money to fix the roof," Rebecca interjected, "You don't need to waste money on this old house. If we sell it, I can invest it, and the profit will be many times over." When Joanne insisted on refusing, the meal turned cold and stiff. Even small things, like Rebecca always finding ways to keep a house key. Joanne had initially thought simply, her daughter still visited, so keeping a key made sense. But now she saw, perhaps Rebecca always wanted to ensure an entry into everything, both figuratively and literally. Perhaps the detail that most pained Joanne was on her 65th birthday. Rebecca gave her a bouquet of vibrant red roses, the same kind Richard used to grow in their small garden. Joanne was so moved she almost cried. But a short while later, while sipping wine, Rebecca softly murmured, "Dad wasted his whole life on this land and this house. If it were me, I would have made it something much more valuable." At the time, Joanne forced a laugh, trying to dismiss it as drunken rambling. But now, that memory became a blade twisting directly into her heart. If these pieces were put together, the picture became clear. Rebecca had been preparing for a long time. It wasn't an impulsive decision, not a moment of greed. It was a plan nurtured, little by little, right before Joanne's eyes. And she, a mother who trusted her daughter too much, had allowed herself to become a helpless witness to this tragedy. Joanne sat in the living room, the house unnervingly quiet. Rebecca had already left, leaving behind the thick atmosphere of an undissipated storm. On the table, old family photos remained, Richard smiling kindly, a young Rebecca nestled in her father's arms. The image pierced Joanne's heart like a needle. She closed her eyes, letting the memories flood back. For years, she had chosen silence. When Rebecca got angry, she remained silent. When Rebecca incurred debts, she remained silent. When she discovered odd details, she still remained silent, because for Joanne, motherhood was the most sacred thing. She feared losing her daughter, feared the day Rebecca would turn away forever. So instead of confronting, she chose to concede, choosing to believe everything would be all right. But today, in the bank, when Brian revealed the words, "full power of attorney," Joanne felt as if she had been slapped awake. My daughter isn't just lost. She's gone so far that she's willing to make her own mother a victim in her own home. The greatest pain isn't the fear of losing money or home. It's the feeling of losing a child. The daughter she once held in her arms, the one she promised Richard she'd protect to the end, now stood before her like a stranger, even an enemy. Joanne wondered, was she the one who sowed the seeds of this tragedy? Had her own weakness, her silence, her blind trust made Rebecca accustomed to her mother always forgiving, always signing whatever she put in front of her? She felt like she was looking in a mirror, seeing a mother too trusting in love and letting that love be exploited. Outside, the wind blew through the rose garden, the petals trembling violently. Joanne looked out the window, seeing the red of the roses blend with Richard's memory. "Keep this house, Jo. It's the last safe place for you and our child." That last wish now echoed like a belated warning bell. Joanne took a deep breath. For the first time in years, she felt a new resolve rising within her, a resolve that was both painful and necessary. She had to protect herself, protect this house, even if it meant standing against her own daughter. She clenched her fists, her eyes welling up with tears, because deep down, she understood. The real battle had yet to begin. All the conflicts, all the cracks, they were just the beginning. And then, in the days to come, the smoldering embers would ignite into a blaze, consuming everything she had once called family. That afternoon, the usually peaceful house felt heavy, as if a storm was brewing. Rebecca threw her handbag onto the sofa with force, her eyes blazing with anger. Joanne sat opposite, clutching a cup of cold tea, her heart pounding. "I can't believe it," Rebecca hissed. "You're taking the side of a stranger over your own daughter. You trust some bank clerk more than your own blood?" Joanne trembled, but this time she didn't stay silent as usual. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice steady. "Rebecca, that wasn't a normal procedure. You put me in a trap. If I had signed, it would have been like handing everything over to you with my own hands. Do you think I wouldn't understand?" Rebecca let out a scoff, her laughter cold. "A trap? You're ridiculous." "I just wanted to help manage things for you. You're getting old, always clumsy with paperwork. I wanted to make sure everything was in order. And you see me as a swindler." Joanne felt blood rush to her face, a sharp pain gripping her chest. She placed her teacup down on the table with a thud. "Not managing, but taking. You've been planning this for a long time, haven't you? Those times you asked about the savings account, those times you secretly opened the safe. It's all clear now, Rebecca. I'm not blind." Silence. The room fell into a terrifying void. Then Rebecca slowly approached, leaning close to her mother's face, her voice a hiss through gritted teeth. "You're not blind, but you're weak. You've been weak and timid your whole life. If your father were still alive, I wouldn't have to suffer like this. Do you know how many opportunities I've missed because of your selfishness?" Joanne froze. The word selfishness felt like a knife twisting in her heart. All her sacrifices, all the years of scrimping and saving for Rebecca, now reduced to that single word. She looked at her daughter, seeing a hard but unfamiliar face, her eyes reflecting more resentment than love. A hot tear rolled down Joanne's cheek. She spoke softly, her voice choked. "My dear, I've spent my whole life protecting you. But if the love my mother has for me only brings back greed and hatred, then I fear we lost each other long ago." Rebecca turned away, hugging her shoulders tightly, as if suppressing an outburst. The atmosphere was so suffocating that Joanne felt she could barely breathe. In that moment, she understood that what had happened at the bank was merely a spark. The real fire had ignited right here in this house, and it wouldn't be extinguished easily. Rebecca turned her back and quickly walked towards the liquor cabinet. She poured a full glass of red wine and downed it in one gulp, as if trying to swallow her anger. Joanne sat still, her hands clasped tightly, her heart aching. She had never seen her daughter so desperate, yet she had also never seen that look, a look mixed with anger, fear, and panic. "I had no other choice, Mother," Rebecca finally blurted out, her voice hoarse. "Did you think I wanted to do this? Did you think I enjoyed taking you to the bank, forcing you to sign papers? I was forced to do it, or else everything would be over." Joanne slowly lifted her head, her heart clenching. "What are you talking about? Over what? What are you hiding from me, Rebecca?" Rebecca gave a forced smile, a twisted one. I have debts. Debts you would never understand. They gave me a deadline, and it's almost up. If I don't have the money, do you know what will happen? They'll take everything, even—" She paused, swallowing hard, her hands gripping the wine glass as if to shatter it. Joanne trembled, her mind reeling. Fragments of memories flooded back. The call from the bank years ago, the photocopy of the land deed, Rebecca's impatience whenever money was mentioned. It all suddenly coalesced into a single picture. Rebecca had fallen into a vortex of debt, and now she was trying to drag her mother into the same abyss. "Rebecca," Joanne whispered, her voice choked with tears. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you choose to deceive me instead of asking for help? Do you know you've dealt a fatal blow to my trust?" Rebecca spun around, her face tense, her eyes red-rimmed. "Because if I asked, you would have refused again. You always refuse, clinging to the house, hoarding every penny saved. You don't understand how much I need to survive in this world out there. I'm tired of begging. I need control. I need certainty." Joanne shot up, anger mingling with pain. "Need control? You call that love? You don't want to save yourself. You want to seize. You see me as a backup bank, not as the mother who gave birth to and raised you." The words exploded into the air like thunder on a clear day. Rebecca froze, her gaze faltering, but then she tightened her lips and raised her head proudly. "If that's what you want to think, then think it. But I won't give up, Mother. I can't give up." Joanne stepped back, her hands clutching her chest, feeling as if their small house had turned into an iron cage, locking her in. She knew, from this moment on, nothing could ever go back to the way it was. Rebecca placed the wine glass on the table, the sound of glass hitting wood sharp and jarring. She walked towards her mother, her voice lowered, but each word was like a knife. "They warned me, Mother. If I don't pay this week, they'll come to the house. Not just this house. Do you understand? But your safety will also be threatened." Joanne froze, her legs trembling. She never thought she would hear such words from her daughter's mouth one day. Who are you involved with, Rebecca? Is it the bank or someone else?" Rebecca remained silent for a moment, then sighed softly, her eyes avoiding Joanne's. That silence was enough for Joanne to understand. It wasn't just the bank, but others as well, people she had only heard of in hushed, haunting whispers. Joanne clutched her head, her heart pounding as if it would burst. She felt both pity and dread. Pity because her daughter had pushed herself onto a dark path, and dread because she herself was being dragged into it. She whispered, her voice choked. "Rebecca, you've gone too far. Why didn't you stop earlier? Why didn't you choose to turn back? Let me help you escape that vortex." Rebecca burst into laughter, a bitter smile. "Turn back? Back to what, Mother? To that meager pension? To this old house? You don't understand. People devour each other every second out there. If you don't take risks, you'll be crushed. I can't accept a dull life like yours." Joanne felt a sharp pain, her shoulders trembling. Those words not only denied her path, but also delivered a blow to her love and years of sacrifice. She wanted to scream, to slap her daughter, but her hands couldn't lift. Deep within her heart, a fierce battle raged. On one side was maternal instinct, the desire to protect, to save her child from the quagmire. On the other was the cruel truth. Rebecca was no longer just a rebellious child. She was a threat, a storm that could sweep away everything Joanne and Richard had built. Finally, Joanne spoke softly, her voice trembling like a whisper in the wind. "You still have a way back, Rebecca. But you must let me help in my way, not by taking what's mine. If you force me to sign, you'll lose not only the house, but me too." Rebecca looked at her mother, her eyes conflicted for a moment. But then the hardness returned, her lips pressed tightly together. "I don't have time, Mother. I can't wait for you to decide anymore. I need everything. Now." Those words were like a death sentence. Joanne felt her heart crack deeper. After the cold declaration, the room plunged into a thick silence. Joanne sat motionless, feeling as if the space around her was shrinking. Rebecca panted, then suddenly collapsed in front of her mother, her hands clutching Joanne's knees. "Mom!" Her voice broke, choked with tears. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to do this, but I'm desperate. If you don't help, they'll destroy me. Can you bear to see your only child dragged down to hell?" Joanne was stunned, her hands trembling midair, unsure whether to push her daughter away or embrace her. The image of a young Rebecca, a little girl with curly hair crying in her mother's arms after being bullied, flashed in her mind. She felt her heart torn in two. Rebecca looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, but her gaze flashing with pleading. "You promised Father you would protect me, didn't you? So please save me now. One signature and I'll be free. I'll start over, I swear." Joanne choked back a sob. She knew she was being drawn into an emotional trap, but those words struck her deepest pain. Her promise to Richard. For years, that was the only thing that kept her going, the promise to never abandon her daughter. "Rebecca," Joanne whispered, her voice trembling. "Do you know how much it hurt to see you at the bank today? It was like a knife in my heart. But even so, I still love you. I don't want to lose you." Rebecca hugged her mother tightly, pressing her cheek against Joanne's knees, her voice a tearful whisper. "Then don't lose me, Mother. Help me this one time. Afterwards, I'll change. I promise. I'll be the daughter you were once proud of again." Joanne closed her eyes tightly. Her tears spilled out, falling onto her daughter's hair. But in her mind, a cold voice echoed, "This isn't the first time she's promised, and each time she promises, she sinks even deeper." The internal struggle tore Joanne apart. She wanted to believe, to grasp at the smallest sliver of hope that motherhood could pull her daughter back. But she was also afraid that if she signed, everything would be lost, the house, the money, and her own dignity. Joanne clenched her fists, trying to stifle a sob. She gently pushed Rebecca away, her voice hoarse but more resolute. "I can't sign, Rebecca. It's not because I don't love you, but because I love you too much. If I give everything to you, you'll sink even further. And I will never forgive myself." Rebecca froze, her eyes flashing with pain and anger. A silence stretched, then her expression shifted. No more tears, only cold calculation returning, as if a failed move had just been attempted. Joanne looked at her daughter, and she knew this battle was far from over. Rebecca shot to her feet, hastily wiping away the lingering tears on her cheeks. In an instant, her vulnerability vanished, replaced by a sharp gaze that sent a shiver down Joanne's spine. "Fine," she said, her voice dry. "If you won't help, then you'll face the consequences yourself." Joanne looked up, her hands gripping the arms of the chair. "What consequences, Rebecca? What are you talking about?" Rebecca walked slowly toward her mother, each step like an accusation. "I used your name to take out loans. If you don't sign over the rights, when they're due, they'll come straight for you. Do you understand? You'll lose everything. You won't need to sign anything. This house, this account, everything will disappear." Joanne felt as if she'd been electrocuted, her heart constricting. Fragments of doubt pieced together a horrifying truth. The strange papers, the calls from the bank years ago, it turned out Rebecca had forged her mother's signature. "No, it can't be," Joanne whispered, tears welling up. "You're my daughter. How could you do this?" Rebecca crossed her arms, her eyes ice cold. "Because you left me no choice. If you wouldn't share, I had to find a way myself. You thought keeping this house tightly was love, but in reality, you pushed me to the edge." Joanne recoiled, her back hitting the chair, trembling like someone cornered. Rebecca's words pierced her heart. Pain, humiliation, and fear merged into a storm within her chest. "Rebecca, you're making me pay for your mistakes." "No," Rebecca interrupted, her voice sharp. "I'm just taking back what should have been mine. If you don't want them knocking on your door, if you don't want to be branded a fraud, then you should sign. At least then, I can resolve this. Otherwise, we'll both lose everything." Joanne felt blood rush to her ears, her palms slick with sweat. She looked at her daughter. She no longer saw the girl from years ago. Before her stood a stranger, cold and dangerous. In that moment, Joanne felt trapped in an invisible net. Motherhood had become a binding rope, preventing her from letting go of her daughter and from protecting herself. She shook her head slightly, tears streaming down her face. "You lied to me, and now you're threatening me. So what is there left to believe, Rebecca?" Rebecca narrowed her eyes, leaning down slightly, her voice quiet but filled with menace. "Believe it or not, it's up to you. But Mother should remember, in this game, you have no escape." The room was dead silent. Joanne sat there, trembling uncontrollably, while Rebecca stood tall, her shadow stretching long on the wall, an unshakable presence. The door closed with a cold slam. Rebecca left, her powerful footsteps echoing in the hallway like a final challenge. Joanne remained frozen on the sofa, her heart pounding violently, each beat heavy as a hammer blow. The space in the house suddenly felt terrifyingly vast, empty, and lost. She raised a hand to her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Rebecca's words still echoed in her mind. "In this game, you have no escape." The word game sent a shiver down Joanne's spine. Her daughter saw everything, motherhood, their home, even her, as mere pawns in a game of money. Joanne wanted to cry, but her tears seemed to have dried up. She sat there, trembling, not knowing where to begin. If Rebecca was telling the truth, then the danger was no longer just a figment of her imagination, but those people out there who could strike at any moment. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Joanne flinched, her heart seizing, convinced the strangers had found her. She stood up shakily, her legs like jelly, and walked towards the door. As the door creaked open, a familiar face appeared. Brian. "Miss Joanne," he said softly, his eyes full of concern. "I'm sorry for coming without calling, but ever since the bank I've felt uneasy. I was afraid something might happen to you." Joanne looked at him, her eyes welling up. In that moment, Brian's appearance was like a lifeline in a stormy sea. She opened the door wider, inviting him in, her voice trembling. "Thank you. Thank you for coming back. I don't know what to do anymore." Brian placed his briefcase on the table and sat opposite her. He observed Joanne for a long moment, then spoke slowly. "You don't have to say everything if you're not ready. But there's one thing I want you to know. Anyone, even family, who pressures you to sign papers you don't understand is wrong, and you have the right to protect yourself." Joanne sobbed, like a child whose fears were finally acknowledged. She lowered her head and whispered, "It was my daughter. My own daughter did this." Brian remained silent, but his hand gently squeezed Joanne's, offering a touch of warmth. "I understand, but you are not alone. There will be a way to protect you in this house. We have to find the truth." Joanne looked up, her eyes tear-filled but with a rare spark of hope. She knew she could no longer rely on Rebecca. Her daughter had chosen a different path, leaving her behind. But at least there was now a stranger, Brian, standing by her side, ready to help her face the coming storm. Brian poured Joanne a glass of water and placed it gently in front of her. His gaze was steady, yet troubled. Joanne clutched the glass, her hands trembling, feeling a sliver of warmth seep into her cold palms. "Miss Joanne," Brian began, his voice deepening. "At the bank today, I saw the signature on the file. It didn't look like your usual signature. I compared it with the original signature on the system, and indeed, there was a clear difference. Someone deliberately forged your signature." Joanne was stunned into silence. She stared at Brian, her mouth agape, but no sound escaping. Fragments of memory flooded back like sharp needles. The strange bank call, the credit card from an unknown source, the papers Rebecca had brought home. She whispered, her voice almost gone. "Oh my God. So it's true. She forged my signature." Brian nodded, his gaze heavy with sorrow. "I don't want to hurt you, but this is extremely serious. If left unaddressed, you could be accused of fraud while the real culprit gets away. You need to protect yourself immediately." Joanne felt her head spin, as if the floor beneath her feet was collapsing. She gripped the armrest of the chair, managing to gasp out, "But that's my daughter. I can't turn her over to the authorities." "I can't." Brian sighed, leaning towards her, his voice firm yet full of empathy. "I understand. I know you love your daughter, no matter what. But love doesn't mean letting her ruin your life. If you don't act, you'll bear the full consequences, not her, and then you'll lose everything." Tears welled up in Joanne's eyes, streaming down her cheeks. She felt both pain and fear. "Rebecca, why did you push me this far?" Brian took a file folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "I've copied some of the transaction documents from the system. This is the credit card application from 3 years ago, under your name. But the signature, it can't be yours, and the contact number matches Rebecca's." Joanne trembled, her eyes wide, her hand shaking as she turned each page. Each word felt like a knife twisting in her heart. There was no longer any room to make excuses for her daughter. Rebecca had truly betrayed her. "I was blind for so long," Joanne choked out, her voice breaking. Brian placed his hand on the table, his voice resolute. "Ms. Joanne, it's time for you to make a choice. Either remain silent and have it all fall upon you, or face the truth and protect yourself. I'll be here to help you with whatever you need." Joanne looked at Brian, her eyes blurred with tears, but a faint light began to flicker deep within them. She understood. All pretense had fallen away. There was nowhere left to run. That night, Joanne sat alone in the living room, the file Brian had left spread before her. Each page clearly displayed her name, a clumsy forged signature, and Rebecca's familiar phone number. She read them over and over, hoping her eyes were deceiving her, hoping there was another explanation. But the truth remained stark and cold. Her own daughter had deceived her. The sound of a safe opening echoed. Rebecca walked in, the sharp scent of her perfume lingering. Joanne looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, her hand clutching the papers tightly. "Rebecca," her voice was hoarse, "explain this to me. All of this. Was it you?" Rebecca froze, a flicker of confusion in her eyes quickly replaced by her usual coldness. She threw her handbag onto the chair, crossing her arms over her chest. "What are you rummaging through, Mother? Who gave that to you?" Joanne slammed the stack of papers onto the table, her voice trembling but filled with rage. "It doesn't matter who gave it to me. I just want to hear it from your own mouth. Did you forge my signature to incur debt? Are you trying to make me bear your sins?" The air was heavy as lead. Rebecca narrowed her eyes, her lips curling into a bitter smile. "What if it was me? So what? I'm your daughter. Won't everything you have eventually belong to me? How is that any different?" Joanne was stunned, her heart feeling as if it were being squeezed. She shot up, tears streaming down her face. "It's different, Rebecca. It's different because you deceived me. You turned me into a puppet. You took advantage of my trust. Since when did you see me as nothing more than a walking wallet?" Rebecca's voice grew sharp, a flicker of fury in her eyes. "Since the day you never truly stood by me. You always clung so tightly to the house, the money, the memories. You thought that was love, but it was just selfishness. I had to struggle on my own out there. And if I didn't, would you have ever given me an opportunity?" Joanne covered her face, her sobs choked and heartbroken. Rebecca's words were not just an excuse, but a knife that tore open the already fractured bond of motherhood. She screamed, her voice breaking. "Your father would be heartbroken to see you like this. He told me to keep this house, to keep you safe, but I failed. You've become a daughter I no longer recognize." Rebecca turned away, her lips pressed into a tight line, her shoulders stiff. For a moment, her eyes glistened as if she were about to cry, but then they hardened like steel. "I don't care what Father thinks. I only care about survival. And if you stand in my way, then I'll walk right over you." The room plunged into a deathly silence. Joanne swayed, as if her own daughter had just shoved her off a cliff. The air in the room was so thick it felt ready to explode. Joanne stumbled back, her eyes wide as she looked at her daughter, a mixture of fear and pain in them. Before her was no longer her only daughter, but a stranger, chillingly distant. "Walk right over me," Joanne whispered, as if she couldn't believe her own ears. "Rebecca, do you hear what you just said? Are you willing to trample over me, the one who raised you with blood and tears, just to chase after empty illusions?" Rebecca stepped closer, her face like iron, her lips a straight line. "You're right. I did say that, and I don't regret it, because in your eyes, I was never enough. You always compared me to Father, that paragon of gentleness, frugality, and hard work. But do you know? The world today doesn't reward those who only save. It devours the slow. I don't want to be like you. I don't want to spend my life in this house, counting every penny and telling myself it's happiness." Joanne trembled, her finger pointing accusingly at her daughter, her voice choked. "Not wanting to be like me doesn't give you the right to betray me. Your father spent his entire life preserving this house, protecting this family, and yet you were willing to sell it all to pay off your dirty debts." Rebecca let out a scoffing laugh, the bitter sound echoing. "This family? This house?" "You still call them treasures? They're nothing but shackles. If it weren't for them, I would have been free long ago." Joanne froze, tears streaming down her face as if a dam had broken. She clutched her chest, her voice choked with sobs. "Do you know, every brick, every door in this place is soaked in your father's sweat and tears. It's not just a house. It's love. It's memories. It's what your father and I dedicated our lives to preserving. Do you want to erase it all?" Rebecca looked directly into her mother's eyes, her gaze hardening. "I don't care about memories. Memories can't pay debts. Memories can't buy freedom. If I have to choose between your past and my future, I'll choose myself." Those words were like the final knives, stabbing directly into Joanne's heart. She trembled violently, feeling as if the world around her was exploding. All the love, all the hopes she had nurtured for her daughter over the years were now crushed to dust. In an instant, Joanne collapsed onto the chair, her shoulders shaking, muttering through choked sobs. "Richard, do you see? Our daughter has become this kind of person." Rebecca turned away, concealing a fleeting look of distress in her eyes, then took a sharp breath, her face hardening like ice again. She didn't want to hear another word. Rebecca turned her back and reached for her handbag, as if intending to leave the room. But Joanne suddenly sprang up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face tense, her shoulders trembling not just from grief, but from an unprecedented rage. "Stop, Rebecca!" Joanne shrieked, her voice echoing throughout the house. Rebecca froze, stunned to hear her mother yell so loudly for the first time in years. Joanne walked towards her, each step heavy, as if carrying the weight of her entire life. "Do you think I will remain silent forever? Do you think I will let you trample on your father's memories, on this mother-daughter bond? No. Today I will say it all, even if it tears this heart apart. Rebecca turned back, frowning. Don't overreact, Mother. I'm just trying to survive. Silence! Joanne interrupted, her hands trembling but her voice remarkably firm. Every penny you borrowed, every failure, I turned a blind eye and helped. How many times I've told myself, she's just impulsive, she'll change. But you've only become more greedy, more heartless. What have I become in your eyes, Rebecca? A bank? A puppet to sign whatever papers you put in front of me? Rebecca bit her lip, silent. But Joanne didn't stop. Decades of suppressed pain erupted into fiery words. You dare call me selfish? Do you know what I've had to do all these years to keep this home intact? Your father died with his last words. Keep this house. Keep our daughter. Yet now, you are the one trying to destroy everything. You've betrayed your father, betrayed me, betrayed your very roots. Joanne's tears fell freely, but her voice grew louder and louder, like a curse. Rebecca, you are no longer the daughter I knew. You've become someone I myself fear, and if you dare to touch this house again, even if my heart breaks, I will stand up against you. The air grew thick. Rebecca took a step back, and for the first time in years, she saw not just love in her mother's eyes, but fire, a blazing inferno of fury ignited from the depths of her pain. In that moment, mother and daughter stood facing each other, like two enemies. One, driven by despair, ready to betray. The other, compelled by love, forced to rise and protect. And that distance, Joanne knew, might never be bridged again. Rebecca narrowed her eyes, her face turning icy cold. The tears from moments ago, the weak pleas while kneeling at her mother's feet, all vanished. Now before Joanne stood a sharp, formidable woman, her eyes blazing with hatred. Yes, Mother, you're right, Rebecca smirked, her voice choked but cruel. You're no longer the innocent daughter I knew, Mom. I've had to learn to live in a cruel world where no one gives me a chance. You keep this house, keep the past, while I have to claw my way to survive. So yes, I guess I'm nothing more than a walking wallet to you, and I'll take, until I can stand on my own. Joanne was stunned, her whole body trembling. Rebecca's words were like sharp, sweet blades, severing the last thread connecting mother and daughter. She felt dizzy, as if pushed into an abyss. Rebecca. Her voice cracked, her trembling hand gripping the chair. Do you hear what you're saying? You see me, the one who gave birth to you and raised you, as just a wallet? What about the love I've given you all these years? What is that to you? Rebecca crossed her arms, her eyes cold. It's weakness. You love, you sacrifice, but you never gave me what I needed. Your love couldn't pay off a single debt. It only bound me to this house, to this past. Joanne choked, tears streaming down her face. She slumped onto the chair, a pained cry escaping her, tearing at her heart. Richard, if only you were alive, what would you do? Our daughter, she's gone. Rebecca watched her mother cry, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. But it was fleeting. She took a deep breath, then turned away coldly, her voice echoing with bitterness. You're too weak, Mom. So weak that I had to save myself, even if it meant stepping all over you. The door slammed shut. Joanne sat in the empty room, her small shoulders shaking uncontrollably. The pain ripped through her heart, leaving a vast emptiness. In that moment, Joanne knew. What had shattered was not money, not the house, but the mother-daughter bond she believed was indestructible. Night fell heavily on the house, darkness enveloping Joanne like a thick curtain. She sat alone, her mind spinning, her heart aching with every beat. After the intense confrontation, she thought she had no strength left for any more shocks, but heaven never allowed her peace. The phone rang, a piercing sound in the silent space. Joanne startled, her hand trembling as she picked it up. A strange male voice, deep and hoarse, spoke. "Is this Mrs. Joanne? We're calling about the loan under your name. It's overdue. If it's not paid within 3 days, we will be forced to take strong measures. Do you understand?" Joanne was petrified, her lips dry. "The loan? What loan? I've never—" The voice cut her off, each word dripping with malice. "Please don't pretend. We have the signature, the documents, everything. Mrs. Joanne, you should know, there are things more terrifying than losing your home. Don't make us come to your door." Click! The call ended, leaving Joanne sitting stiffly, her heart pounding. She dropped the phone, her hands ice cold. That chill spread through her body, making her tremble as if sitting in a blizzard. At that very moment, the door creaked open. Brian entered, his breath ragged. He had just finished his shift, but his eyes were filled with anxiety. "Mrs. Joanne, I just checked the system files again. There's something you need to know." Joanne looked at him, her voice trembling. "Brian, they just called. They said I owe money. They threatened to come here." Brian tightened his grip on his briefcase strap and sat down opposite her. He took out a few photocopies and placed them in front of Joanne. "It's not just the credit cards, ma'am. 3 years ago, Rebecca mortgaged a piece of land left by your father by switching the paperwork. This house was lucky not to be touched, but that land, it's already been sold." Joanne was stunned, as if struck by lightning. "No, it can't be. That was the land Richard kept for her. He wanted to leave it as her dowry." Brian nodded, his eyes full of pity. "Perhaps that's why she could easily switch the documents. No one would suspect when a daughter assists her mother with the procedures. But the truth is, Rebecca had already sold that land long ago. The current debt is a consequence of that." Joanne slumped her head, her hands clutching her chest. Richard's words echoed in her mind. "Hold on to it, Jo. Don't let anyone force you to give it up." But she had failed. Not because of an outsider, but because of the very child Richard had once cherished. Joanne's tears fell onto the cold papers. In that moment, she understood that the nightmare had never ended. Everything she thought was lost could actually be lost even more. And the most painful part? It was all hidden by the very hands she had trusted the most. It was nearing midnight, and Joanne was still waiting. The dim yellow light cast her long shadow on the floor, trembling like a dying candle. When Rebecca's car tires squealed outside the gate, Joanne clutched the papers in her hand, her chest tightening with a dull ache. The door opened, and Rebecca entered, her high heels clicking sharply on the wooden floor. She flinched slightly when she saw her mother still sitting there. "Mom, you're not asleep yet. Do you want to blame me for something else?" Joanne didn't answer immediately. She slowly raised the stack of papers, her voice trembling but sharp. "Rebecca, the land your father left, the land he wanted to keep for you. You switched the documents and sold it 3 years ago, didn't you?" Rebecca froze, but only for a moment before her face regained its cold composure. She shrugged and said indifferently, "Yes, I sold it. And it was the right decision. That land was good for nothing but growing weeds. I turned it into money, which is at least more valuable than letting parents watch roses bloom and fade." Joanne was stunned, her legs trembling as if they would break. She exclaimed, her voice cracking, You dare do such a thing? That was your father's legacy. He trusted you, he loved you, and yet you betrayed that trust." Rebecca smirked, her eyes defiant. "Dad trusted me, Mom trusted me. So what? Did your love feed me? Did it pay my debts? Land or houses, they're all just tools. I used them to survive, and I have no regrets." Joanne clutched her chest, her breathing rapid. Tears fell onto the desk, smudging like bloodstains. She almost screamed, "You've taken everything, Rebecca. Not just the land, not just the money. You've taken my trust too. What else have you left me?" Rebecca flinched, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. But then she took a deep breath, her voice turning cold. "What you have left is me, and you have to accept me. No matter how much it hurts, I am still your daughter. And sooner or later, you'll have to sign." Joanne slumped into a chair, clutching her head, tears streaming down her face. She felt as though her heart and soul had been ripped out, leaving only an empty shell. Rebecca, the daughter she had devoted her life to raising, now stood before her, not as a loved one, but as a stranger who had taken everything. In that moment, Joanne knew. Her maternal bond with Rebecca had been pushed to the brink of complete collapse, and perhaps there would be no way back. Joanne sat slumped in the darkness. The clock ticked on, each beat echoing in her heart, confirming the cruel truth. Her daughter had betrayed not only her mother, but also her deceased father. The porch light flickered on. Joanne looked up, her eyes swollen. Brian entered, his face tense. He saw Joanne's despair and rushed to her side. "Mrs. Joanne, I'm so sorry for being so late. But there's something I can no longer keep to myself." Joanne managed to lift her head, her voice hoarse. "What more can you possibly tell me? I just found out Rebecca sold the land her father left behind. Is there any greater pain than this?" Brian sat down, placing a new file on the table. He opened it slowly, his voice grave. "Yes, ma'am, and you need to prepare yourself. Rebecca didn't just sell the land, she also filed a mortgage for this house a few months ago. The process wasn't completed because the bank required your personal presence. That's why she brought you to the bank last week, to finalize the signature." Joanne was stunned into silence, her hands trembling, a paper falling to the floor. Her ears rang, and the whole room seemed to spin. "No, it can't be. This house. Richard asked me to keep it at all costs. And yet, Rebecca, did she intend to sell even her own home?" Brian nodded slowly, his voice filled with sadness. "Yes. If you had signed that day, the house would no longer have been yours. And now, Rebecca owes not only the bank, but also loan sharks. If they find out this house hasn't been sold, they'll try to pressure you. You need to be very careful." Joanne bowed her head, covering her face with her hands. The pain washed over her like a tsunami, sweeping away every shred of hope she had clung to. She heard Richard's voice echo in her mind. "Keep this house, Jo." But her heart shattered, for the betrayer was the daughter they both loved. "Brian," Joanne choked out, her voice like a whisper on the wind. "Why did she do this to me? Why has my own blood become my enemy?" Brian placed a warm hand on her shoulder. "Because fear and greed have blinded her. But Mrs. Joanne, you cannot let your weakness give her more ammunition. You need to stand up and protect what's left." Joanne looked at Brian, a faint glimmer of light in her tear-filled eyes. She didn't know if she still had enough strength, but at least she understood one thing. If she fell, this house, these memories, all of it would disappear. The door burst open. Rebecca strode in, her high heels clacking like a drumbeat announcing an approaching storm. She paused for a moment, seeing Brian sitting beside her mother and Joanne standing tall, no longer trembling. "You again," Rebecca sneered, her eyes blazing at Brian. "Have you no shame, interfering in my family affairs like this?" Brian didn't answer, just tilted his head, his gaze unwavering. Joanne took a deep breath, her hands trembling but her voice unusually firm. "Rebecca, I know everything. It's not just the forged signatures, not just selling the land. It's this house, too. You intended to mortgage it behind my back." "If it weren't for Brian, at the bank that day, I would have lost everything." The air grew thick. Rebecca blinked, wavering for a moment, then let out a scoff. "So, he finally told you everything. Fine. At least you now know my true colors." Joanne frowned, pained. "True colors? No, Rebecca. This isn't my daughter. This is a stranger. My daughter was never this cruel." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "Your daughter? Are you sure?" Joanne froze. A deadly silence enveloped the room. She spoke slowly. What? What are you saying?" Rebecca gave a cold laugh, a bitter smile that eroded every last bit of hope. "You think you know everything? The truth is, I'm not your biological daughter. Father told me before he passed away. I was just a child he brought home, an adopted child you never knew about. You loved me with all your heart, but in reality, you were just keeping a stranger in your home." Joanne was stunned. Her face turned ashen, her legs recoiling as if about to collapse. "No, it can't be. Richard never told me." Rebecca let out a bitter laugh, her voice hissing. "Then you've lived in delusion your whole life. Father hid it from you because he knew you wouldn't accept it. He loved me, but you, all the love you gave me in my eyes, was just pity." Joanne clutched her chest, her breathing ragged, her heart feeling like it would shatter. The truth that had just been revealed was like the final knife cutting all the ties that bound them. She trembled, her voice cracking. I'm not your own daughter?" Brian stood up abruptly, looking at Rebecca with horror, then turned to Joanne. Joanne, don't listen to any more. Whatever the truth may be, you are the one who raised her, who loved her with all your life." But Joanne heard nothing more. Her ears were ringing, tears streamed down her face, soaking her cheeks. Her whole body trembled like a leaf in a storm. In that moment, she understood. What she thought was the bottom had turned out not to be the end after all. Joanne sank onto the chair, her hands covering her head. The room spun as if the sky had just fallen directly on top of her. Rebecca's words still echoed, sharp as a hammer blow straight to the heart. "I am not your biological daughter." Tears streamed down. Joanne muttered like a madwoman. "No, it can't be. Richard, why did you hide this from me? Why does she know, and I don't?" Rebecca stood there, looking down at her mother with eyes mixed with coldness and bitterness. She gave a faint laugh. "Do you understand now? Why I never felt like I truly belonged here? Why I never felt like I was enough? You could pretend to love me, but deep down, you only saw me as an outsider. And now, I don't need that love anymore. I just need what you have." Joanne looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, but they shone with immense pain. "Rebecca, do you know I held you in my arms from the very first day? I stayed up all night when you had a fever. I sacrificed everything so you could study, so you could have a future. I may not be your birth mother, but this love is real. You have the right to deny it, but you cannot erase those years." Rebecca faltered for a moment, her eyes flickering, but she quickly turned away, her shoulders stiff, her voice returning to a sharp coldness. "I don't need the past. I need the present. And right now, I need you to sign. If not, everything will collapse, both you and me." Joanne clutched her face, sobs erupting between her cries, but amidst the terrible pain, a tiny spark of light flickered in her heart. Yes, Rebecca might not be her flesh and blood, but for so many years, she had loved the girl as her own. Motherhood wasn't just about blood. It was in every tear, every hug, every sleepless night. And because of that, today's pain was even more acute, because she was losing the child she had raised, regardless of her bloodline. Joanne took a deep breath, wiped her tears, and looked straight at Rebecca. Her voice still trembled, but it had gained some firmness. "I may not be your birth mother, but you are still my daughter. That is why I will not let you destroy yourself, nor will I let you destroy this family. If I have to fight against you, I will. And Rebecca, you will never steal the soul of this house." Rebecca looked at her mother, momentarily stunned to see in those aged eyes not just pain, but something else. A resilience like roots deeply planted in the earth, not easily uprooted. In that moment, the distance between them was like a bottomless abyss. But in Joanne's heart, for the first time in years, she no longer felt like a victim. She had stood up, though her heart bled, to protect the last remaining things, her dignity and the unconditional love she had given her entire life. The house was plunged into a deathly silence. After her final words, Rebecca turned and left, her footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. The door slammed shut, leaving Joanne alone in the suffocating vastness. She sat in silence, listening to the wind whistle through the door cracks, listening to her own heart beating erratically in her chest. From that moment on, Joanne knew. In her daughter's eyes, she was no longer a mother, but merely an obstacle, a treasure to be seized. Joanne tried to stand, but her legs felt heavy, as if carrying the weight of the world. She shuffled to the bedroom, looking around the room filled with memories. The wedding photo with Richard, a frame of Rebecca as a newborn, the bed where they used to sit and tell fairy tales. With each glance, Joanne's heart felt like it was being sliced anew. She sank down by the edge of the bed, tears streaming, soaking the pillow. "Richard, do you see? I failed. I couldn't keep our daughter. I couldn't keep this family," she choked out, her voice hoarse from too much crying. In the darkness, Joanne felt consumed by loneliness. She had once thought growing old meant having her children by her side, a warm home to rely on. But now, this very home had become a prison, every wall echoing with the sounds of betrayal. The phone rang again. Joanne startled, her heart clenching. She dared not answer it, because she knew it wasn't someone calling to check on her, but a new threat from those pursuing Rebecca. Even without answering, she heard the long ringing sound, like a blade cutting into her nerves. Joanne buried her face in a pillow, sobbing. She felt cornered. On one side, a mother's love she couldn't abandon. On the other, the harsh reality that this maternal love was being exploited to its fullest. Every breath she took felt heavy as stone, torn between holding on and letting everything go. Outside, Rebecca's car faded away, merging into the night. Joanne knew the distance between them was no longer measured in steps, but in an unbridgeable chasm. Joanne didn't sleep all night. She sat by the window, her vacant eyes gazing at the rose garden blooming silently under the pale moonlight. The vibrant red petals brought back memories of Richard, how he meticulously cared for each bush, then smiled and said, "This will be Rebecca's playground, where she grows up with the happiest memories." Joanne closed her eyes gently, and memories flooded back. Images of Rebecca as a child, toddling across the lawn, her cheeks flushed, her clear voice calling, "Mom!" The little girl once wore tiny shoes, stumbled and scraped her knee, then burst into tears in her mother's arms. Joanne recalled the feeling of holding her child, pressing her cheek against hair that smelled of sunshine, her heart overflowing with happiness. Back then, she believed that with love, nothing could separate a mother and child. Tears welled up in Joanne's eyes again, hot and stinging. She wondered, where was that little girl from years ago? When did those eyes become so distant? When did Mom turn into accusations and threats? Joanne clutched her face, her heart aching with each beat. A part of her still screamed, "She is my child. No matter what, she still needs to be saved." But another part whispered, "No, she has chosen her own path. She has turned her mother's love into a tool. Saving her would mean destroying herself." The battle in Joanne's mind was so fierce, she felt utterly exhausted. Each beat of her heart felt like it was being torn apart by two opposing forces, an eternal maternal love and the fear of betrayal. Joanne stood up and walked out into the garden. The moonlight cast its glow on the vibrant red rose bushes. She reached out and touched a petal, whispering, "Rebecca, do you still remember your father? Do you remember the days you ran around here, laughing in the wind? Why have you forgotten everything? Why did you choose money over love?" The night breeze swept through, making the petals tremble and fall like scattered snow at her feet. Joanne knelt down, embracing a rose branch as if embracing the memories of her entire family. She sobbed, her pain mingling with her longing, creating a heartbroken cry that pierced the night. Deep down, a fragile flicker of hope remained. Perhaps Rebecca was just lost. Perhaps one day she would remember her mother's embrace, remember her father's roses. But at the same time, an abyss of despair opened, reminding Joanne that perhaps everything was irrevocably broken. In the following days, Joanne lived in constant anxiety. She locked the doors carefully, yet her heart pounded erratically with every sound outside. Richard's gentle smile in the photograph seemed to deepen her pain, a reminder that he was gone, leaving her alone in the storm. That afternoon, as Joanne was preparing a cup of tea, a heavy, insistent knock echoed at the door. She froze, her trembling hand spilling boiling water onto the floor. Moving slowly towards the door, she peeked through the curtains. Two strange men stood there, dressed in dark coats with a rough demeanor. One of them knocked again, his deep voice resonating. "Ms. Joanne, open the door. We need to talk about your debt and your daughters." Joanne retreated, her heart pounding, her hand clutching her chest. She didn't answer, standing frozen, hoping they would leave. But the knocking grew more violent, making the door shake. Finally, after a few tense minutes, they left, but not without sliding a piece of paper under the door. Joanne trembled as she picked it up. The scrawled words sent a chill down her spine. 3 days. If you don't pay, we'll be back. She sank to the floor, her hand clenching the crumpled paper. Joanne had never felt her home so fragile. The house that was once a sanctuary now felt like a battlefield, vulnerable to invasion at any moment. That night, Joanne couldn't sleep. The wind rustling through the rose garden sounded like eerie whispers. Shadows moving on the street outside made her jump, convinced they were watching her. Joanne huddled by the window, a blanket wrapped tightly around her, her unfocused gaze lost in the darkness. In that harsh solitude, Joanne felt like a lost shadow. There was no one left to lean on, no Rebecca by her side. And even if she were, it would only add to the pain. She felt everything slipping away, every brick, every memory, every bit of trust. She whispered as if in prayer, "Richard, where are you?" "I'm so weak. I don't know if I have the strength to fight anymore." And in the darkness, Joanne realized, what was truly terrifying wasn't just the knock on the door, but the shattering from within. She was losing faith in motherhood, in the very meaning of life itself. Joanne sat motionless on the sofa all the next morning. The threatening note still lay on the table, its messy script like scars etched deep into her mind. Her eyes were sunken, her lips cracked and dry, her entire body trembling like a winter leaf about to fall. She had spent her whole life holding on, protecting, but now it all felt like sand slipping through her fingers. Rebecca was gone. Strangers were threatening her, and Joanne had no one left. She whispered to herself, "Maybe I was wrong from the start. I shouldn't have hoped so much. She was never truly mine." The doorbell rang. Joanne startled, her heart pounding. She hesitated, fearing the people from last night had returned. But a familiar voice called from outside, "Mrs. Joanne, it's me, Brian. Are you all right?" Tears welled up in Joanne's eyes involuntarily. She rushed to open the door. Before her stood Brian, his face young, but his eyes filled with worry. He saw her haggard state and immediately steadied her frail shoulders. "Oh my, have you been crying all night?" Brian asked softly. Joanne choked back a sob, gripping his hand like a last lifeline over an abyss. "Brian, they came here. They threatened me. They said if I didn't pay in 3 days, they'd be back. I don't have the strength anymore." Brian gently guided her to sit, his voice deep and steady. "You're not alone, Mrs. Joanne. I've investigated. Those people aren't a legitimate bank. They're loan sharks. If we can prove Rebecca forged the signature and falsified the documents, you won't be legally responsible. But you need to be strong. Don't let them push you to despair." Joanne looked at him, her eyes tearful, her body trembling. "But I've lost everything. My daughter isn't mine anymore. What do I have left to hold on to?" Brian sat beside her, his voice softening, warm as a gentle comfort. "You still have yourself. And you still have this house, these memories. Rebecca may have betrayed you, but that doesn't erase the genuine love you had for her. That love, even if trampled, proves you were a wonderful mother. Don't let anyone take that away from you." Joanne choked back a sob, tears streaming down her face. But amidst the fog of despair, his words were a tiny spark, piercing through the thick darkness. She gripped Brian's hand tightly, nodding faintly. In that moment, Joanne realized, even if the world collapsed, there was still someone who believed in her, someone not of her blood but a pillar of support. And sometimes, just a little bit of faith is enough to stop a person from falling into the abyss. The next morning, pale sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating Joanne's gaunt face. She had sat up all night, thinking until she was exhausted. Within her, two fires warred, one of maternal love pulling her back, the other of harsh reality, forcing her to protect herself. Finally, Joanne stood up. She retrieved an old file from the cabinet where Richard had kept his will and a handwritten note. His shaky script reappeared before her eyes. "Joe, please keep this house. It holds the soul of our family." Joanne clutched the paper, tears rolling down her cheeks. This was more than just property. It was where Richard had entrusted his spirit, the final testament to a marriage and a love she had cherished her entire life. When Rebecca returned at noon, her face hollow and her eyes still tense, Joanne was waiting in the living room. On the table lay all the legal documents, neatly arranged, along with Richard's will. Rebecca frowned. "What trick are you trying to pull now? If you don't sign, we'll lose everything." Joanne looked up, her voice hoarse but strangely firm. "No, Rebecca. It is precisely because I don't want to lose everything that I will not sign. This house will always be in my name, and one day, if you truly repent, perhaps I will hand it over. But not today. Not when you are deceiving and threatening me." Rebecca's eyes widened in anger. "How long do you think you can resist? They'll come. You'll lose everything too." Joanne shook her head, her eyes shining through her pain. "If I must lose it, I will lose it as someone who defended the dignity and memories of this family. I cannot let your father be betrayed again, and Rebecca, I cannot let you destroy your own path by turning me into a victim." Rebecca was struck dumb, her lips trembling, a flicker of something akin to fear in her eyes. But pride made her turn away, her voice laced with bitter venom. "You will regret this." Joanne closed her eyes, her heart constricting, but she no longer trembled. For the first time in years, she felt she was standing tall. She knew this choice might cost her her only child, but it was the only way to preserve the family's soul, keep her promise to Richard, and preserve herself. As the door closed behind Rebecca, Joanne sat down, clutching the will to her chest. Tears fell, but this time they were not just despair, they were release. As evening fell, the house sank back into silence. Joanne sat on the porch, her hand gently caressing the fading roses of late autumn. The scratches from the thorns left red marks on her fingers. But she didn't pull away. The pain was real, but it made her feel alive. Inside, the loss remained a bottomless chasm. Rebecca had left, leaving behind bitter words. Joanne knew that maternal love couldn't disappear in a day, but it had been so trampled that its form was unrecognizable. She still loved her daughter, but that love was now just a bleeding wound, a dull, aching pain. Brian dropped by at sunset, bringing a bag of food and a gentle smile. He didn't say much, just quietly laid out the food on the table, then sat beside her. That silence was the medicine Joanne needed. Not empty platitudes, but genuine presence. "Mrs. Joanne," Brian finally spoke, his voice warm and deep. "This house will be safe. I've contacted a lawyer. They will help you protect your ownership. And as for Rebecca, you shouldn't blame yourself. You did everything a mother could." Joanne nodded slightly, tears rolling down her cheeks, but her eyes were calmer than before. "Thank you, Brian. Perhaps I will never understand why things reached this point, but at least I kept my promise to Richard. I kept this house. And above all, I kept myself." The sun set, painting the sky a brilliant orange. Joanne looked at the sunset, her heart filled with a mixture of sadness and serenity. She had little left but memories, yet she no longer felt the same fear as before. In her heart, a tiny spark of hope ignited. Perhaps one day Rebecca would return, not to demand or deceive, but to find her mother's embrace again. Joanne dared not hope for too much, but even a flicker of light gave her a reason to keep going. She whispered, as if speaking to both Richard and herself, "This house still stands, and my heart, though scarred, has not broken." In that moment, Joanne realized tragedy had not taken everything from her. It had only forced her to learn to rise from the ruins, to understand that sometimes true love is not about holding on tightly, but about daring to let go, and still having enough faith to wait for a miracle. 3 months later, the front garden had changed. New roses had bloomed, redder than ever, as if Richard were still quietly tending to them from somewhere. Joanne stood in the garden, a sun hat shading her head, her hands smudged with soil, but her eyes brighter, more peaceful. Rebecca did not return. After that day, her daughter's presence vanished from Joanne's life like a storm that had passed. The wound remained, but Joanne learned not to let it torment her every night. She knew some cracks never fully healed, but one still had to live with them. Brian still visited often, helping her with legal matters and chatting over tea. He had become an unexpected companion, a gentle comfort in her lonely old age. Joanne didn't call it family, but Brian's presence at least kept the house from feeling too empty. That afternoon, Joanne wrote in her diary, "Some things we cannot keep, nor can we change, but we can still choose to hold on to ourselves. This house is my soul, my promise, the love I once had. Though a part is broken, I will cherish what remains, and who knows, perhaps one day, when the wind changes direction, my daughter will find her way back." She closed the notebook and looked up at the sunset over the rose garden. In her aged eyes, a light still flickered. It was no longer the light of blind faith, but of a heart that had been shattered yet resiliently learned to love again. Joanne whispered softly, "Richard, don't worry. I'm still standing, and I'm still waiting."